Welcome to Poetry Notes number 3. This batch of notes will finish off our poetry booklet and will tell you about all the different forms of poetry, all the different types. Starting with an acrostic poem. A lot of you have seen these before. This is a poem in which the first letters of each line form a word or a message relating to the subject of the poem. The example on your page is called whiskers because if you look down the left side, the first letter in each line spells the word whiskers. White and orange striped, he reminds me of a tiger, idly laying in the sun, stretched out across the grass. Kitten, who dreams of being ferocious, even as he purrs in his sleep, runs after his toys until tired. Soft and warm, he sleeps on my lap. So this is an acrostic poem all about a cat whose name we can assume is Whiskers because the word down the side is whiskers. A cinquain. This is a 5-line poem with lines in the following order. It's very specific. You have to follow this pattern if you're writing a cinquain. The first line has a noun with 2 syllables. Now that could be 2 one-syllable nouns or a noun word that has 2 syllables. Line 2 are adjectives and this takes up 4 syllables. The third line is 6 syllables and they're action verbs. Line 4 is a phrase about the topic that takes up 8 syllables. And the very last line is a synonym for the title, which is 2 syllables to match the first line. Now, you must follow this pattern of syllables and you must follow this pattern of parts of speech. You have to have the right thing in each line, otherwise it's not a cinquain, it's just a regular old poem. The example here at the bottom of the page doesn't have a title, but it goes like this. Dalmatian, spotted, happy, running, barking, jumping, a wagging tail in the end, fire dog. Dalmatian is a noun, a person, place, thing, or idea, and it's close enough to 2 syllables that we'll take it. 2 adjectives, spotted and happy. 3 verbs, running, barking, jumping. A phrase about a Dalmatian, wagging tail in the end. And a synonym for the title, another way to say the title. Another way to say Dalmatian is a fire dog. They're normally used by the fire departments. A traditional cinquain goes by the number of syllables in each line. However, modern cinquains tend to go by the number of words. A concrete or shape poem. This poem could go by either name. I prefer to call them concrete poems. However, a lot of times you'll also see them referred to as shape poems because these are poems that are written in the shape of the thing that it's describing. For example, the poem on the left is called Green. Bright, early spring and the oak tree's beauty shimmers the eye of sunshine through her high, waving branches, revealing the squirrel's bushy tail and the robin red breast, perched on twigs deep inside a glowing mass of green, singing a sweet lullaby to her young. Oh, how we love the time of spring. This is a poem all about a tree, and so it's in the shape of a tree. The second poem on the right is called Concrete Cat. Yes, it's not printed on your page, but here it is. You need to copy this poem on your page under the title Concrete Cat by Dorothy Charles. You need to write it exactly as it is written here in this picture. This is a good time to pause the video so that you can copy it. you'll see that this concrete poem is written a little bit differently than the tree poem. It is in the shape of a cat, but the words making up the parts of the cat are the actual parts of the cat. The ear, E-A-R, is written in the shape of an ear. Whisker is written sticking off from the mouth. There are 4 paws, a bent tail, a dish, a litter box, and an upside-down mouse. We can infer from this poem that the poem is telling us the cat killed the mouse, has used the litter box, and is now eating something out of its dish. And that's the poem in Life of a Cat. The next kind of poem is a dimant. It's French. Some people say diamante. This poem is another prescribing poem. It's very specific. Okay? It is a 7-line poem in the shape of a diamond. I'm drawing a diamond instead of writing it, and you can do that too. Line 1 is the subject, S-U-B-J-E-C-T. It's one word. Okay. Line 2 are 2 adjectives. I'm going to abbreviate adjectives here, ADJ. If you want to write the whole word, that's fine. Line 3 are 3 words ending in I-N-G. Ing. Usually these are verbs, and these 3 words have to relate to the subject that you wrote in line 1. Line 4 is 2 words that describe the subject and 2 more words that describe the opposite of the subject. Line 5 has 3 words that end in ing again, but this time they're talking about the opposite from the subject, not the subject itself. I'm abbreviating opposite this time. Line 6 is 2 words, 2 adjectives. Remember, adjectives are describing words, and this time we're describing the opposite of the subject. And line 7 is simply the opposite to the subject, one single word. So when you write it out, it will make a diamond shape because you're starting with 1 word, then 2 words, then 3 words, then 4 words in the middle, and then narrowing your number of words back down. The top half of the diamond is all about the subject of the poem, and the bottom half of the diamond is all about the opposite of the poem. The example here on your page is all about monsters. Monsters, creepy, sinister, hiding, lurking, stalking. Vampires, mummies. That's where the half about monsters ends. And the second half is all about the opposite. Werewolves and more. Chasing, pouncing, eating, hungry, scary creatures. So now the poem is changed to talk about the opposite. Creatures, anything besides monsters. Alright, a found poem. These are really fun. We will be writing a found poem in class. Found poem is a poem consisting of words found in a real-life context. Such as from a book, from graffiti, or even a billboard. And then we take these words and we turn them into a poem. For example, here on the left is a poem called This is New York, a book spine poem. This person took a bunch of different books and lined them up, and when you read the spines or the titles on the edge from top to bottom, it makes a poem. People occupy everything. Everything sings. A glorious enterprise. This is New York. The poem on the right was taken from a page of a book. The person who wrote this picked out words that were meaningful to them and arranged them in an order to create a poem. They then highlighted or colored around those words so that they stand out, and the design sometimes aids the shape of the poem. We're going to be making a found poem like this later in class. This poem reads, "In my nature is one who wishes to know himself. I am a sleeping thought that does not cease thinking. I am the dream that I see and feel. I am." The next type of poem is a free verse poem. We've already talked about this a little bit. This is a poem that has very few rules. It usually does not have rhyme or have a set meter. Remember, meter is the rhythm of a poem. Usually free verse poems get to do whatever they want. For example, I watch as the butterfly lands on a flower in my garden. The orange of the butterfly's wings looks especially bright against the yellow petals. The insect drinks the flower's nectar and then gracefully flutters its wings and flies away. This poem has no rhythmic pattern that we can discern, and if you figure out the rhyme scheme for it, butterfly gets an A, garden gets a B, looks gets a C, petals a D, nectar an E, away gets an F. There's no rhyming at all. It's definitely a free verse poem. A haiku is very, very fun. Very short, sweet, and to the point. This is a poem that is usually about nature or about the seasons with 3 unrhymed lines. Each line follows a pattern of syllables. The first line has 5 syllables, the second line has 7 syllables, and the last line has 5 syllables again. It must follow this 3-line, 5-7-5 syllable pattern. Otherwise, it's not a haiku. Haiku seems like a funny word, but this is a type of poem that was invented in Japan. The Japanese like to keep things short, sweet, and to the point, like their haikus. For example, on the left, one lonely wailing voice in the lovely cold forest, black timber wolf song. That haiku is all about a wolf. And if you look in the first line, one lone wailing voice, there are 5 syllables. In the middle line, in the lovely cold forest, 7 syllables. And last, black timber wolf song, 5 syllables again. Perfect haiku. The haiku on the right is a non-traditional haiku as far as its content, but it still is a haiku. Haikus are easy, but sometimes they don't make sense. Refrigerator. This haiku definitely follows the 5-7-5 syllable pattern, but it's not about nature or seasons, and that's okay. Here's a haiku I found when my daughter was about to be born. I almost bought her this shirt. This is my onesie. It has a haiku on it. My parents are nerds. Another perfect example of a haiku. Limericks. Limericks are tricky. They're tricky to write, but they're really fun to say. A limerick is a funny poem with 5 lines that always, always, always has the same rhyme and meter patterns. Lines 1, 2, and 5 rhyme, and lines 3 and 4 rhyme with each other. I also want you to write in the rhyme scheme just so you can memorize it. A, B, B, A. This is always going to be the rhyme scheme for a limerick. If a poem follows this rhyme scheme, and then the poem ends, it's probably a limerick. For example, there once was a young girl named Jill, who was scared by the sight of a drill. She brushed every day, so her dentist would say, "Your teeth are so perfect, no bill." This has a very distinct meter when you read it out loud. We can mark our words that are accented. Mark the words that are non-accented. And see that we come up with this pattern. Unstressed, stressed, unstressed, unstressed, stressed, unstressed, unstressed, stressed. This pattern is the same, or should be the same, for lines 1, 2, and 5. Lines 3 and 4 are a little bit different. They're shorter, so they have a different pattern. First, mark your stressed syllables, and then mark your unstressed. The next type of poem is a lyric poem. This is a highly musical poem. Yay! That expresses the feelings and the emotions of the speaker. Many poems, even most poems of this type, are songs. Remember how I said all songs are poems? Well, songs are going to fit in the lyric poem category. We call the words to a song lyrics for a reason. Here's an excerpt from a lyric poem that did get turned into a song by a group named Simon and Garfunkel. Are you going to Scarborough Fair? Parsley, sage, rosemary, and thyme. Remember me to one who lives there, for once she was a true love of mine. Have her make me a cambric shirt, parsley, sage, rosemary, and thyme, without a seam or fine needlework, and then she'll be a true love of mine. Any type of song that you want to think about would fit in this lyric category. Also, nursery rhymes are very popular for this category because you could sing along to them. They have a sort of sing-songy cadence. The next kind of poem is a narrative poem. This is a story told in a poem. Sometimes this type of poem could also be called an epic. These epic poems are very, very long. Most narrative poems are long anyway, but epics are super long, as long as a book. A narrative poem has to have all the elements of a short story. It has to have characters, it has to have a plot, and it has to have setting. So there has to be an actual story going on in the poem. Not all narrative poems are super long. You can tell a story in just a few words. But these three examples, the Odyssey, the Charge of the Light Brigade, and Paul Revere's Ride, are some perfect examples of narrative poems. They're too long to put here, but you can look them up at your leisure. Paul Revere's Ride we've already looked at in class when we noticed that it was really, really long, with lots and lots of stanzas. And it told a story about the Revolutionary War. The Charge of the Light Brigade also tells a story about war in Europe. And the Odyssey is an epic. It is a long enough poem that it's its own book. We'll read a shortened version of the Odyssey later this year in language arts. Our last type of poem is called a sonnet, and this is probably the hardest one that sixth graders have as far as writing goes. This is another fixed form, means you have to follow this pattern. It has 14 lines. Usually these lines are written in our favorite kind of meter, iambic pentameter. That means that there are 5 feet in a line, and each foot is an iamb. If you don't remember what an iamb is, look back on your meter page. Now, there are two main types of sonnets. The first kind is an Italian sonnet. That is on the left, and you can see the first part of the rhyme scheme written here for you. It always follows the same pattern of rhyme scheme. A, B, B, A, B, B, A, B, B, A, etc. The sonnet on the right is called a Shakespearean sonnet because it has 14 lines, it's in iambic pentameter, but Mr. Shakespeare decided to change up the rhyme scheme from the traditional Italian sonnet and make it his own. So all of his sonnets follow this A, B, A, B, C, D, C, D, E, F, E, F, G, G pattern. If I give you a poem with 14 lines and you figure out the rhyme scheme, you should be able to tell whether it is an Italian sonnet or whether it's a Shakespearean sonnet. That is all the different types of poems that we are going to be learning about in 6th grade. That is the end of our poetry notes. I hope you filled out all of your poetry booklet. If you need to go back and listen to something again, please do that. And as always, if you have questions, come and ask me.